Hey guys, this is Paul with rcFoamFighters. Basically, this is going to be a quick video on the build of the new FF-Stingray plane. These plans are now available on our website for free. You can find our website at www.rcFoamFighters.net, and they will be under the foam board planes tab. Anyway, again, like I said, they will be free. It's a PDF plan. It's going to have the tiled sheets and also a non-tiled set of plans at the back of the plan set. Okay guys, after you printed all your plan sheets out, you're going to have a bunch of tiled sheets basically that look like this. It's got a blue border around it if you printed it in color. Anyway, that's the printable area of the plan. So I put a little bit of a margin on here so everybody can print it, because not everybody has a printer that'll print all the way to the edge of the page. So if you have an older printer, it might not print all the way to the edge. So there's a little bit of a margin around it. So we're going to end up putting these pieces together just like this key plan here. So first thing I do usually is I'll cut off along the blue line margin, cut off the right side and the bottom of the margin. This will allow us to tape it together so it fits together nice like a puzzle. Okay, so basically you're going to do that with all the sheets, and then you're just going to come through and tape them together, line it up, as best you can. Start putting all the pieces together, and then you'll just use some tape to tape it together and hold it together. You want to do that for all sheets until you get it made where it looks like the key plan. Okay guys, when you have the plans all taped together, so it looks like the key plan, you're ready to kind of trim along the line. I don't know if you can see that, but there's an outline that shows a 20 by 30 foam board size. So you can cut roughly on the inside of that a little bit, and then you can just tape it down to the foam board. You're going to need 3 pieces of 20 by 30 inch foam board, and you'll roughly use 2.5 of them to make this plane. Okay guys, I've got all the plans now taped down to the foam board. As you can see, I did cut off some of the excess parts of the plan, so it's easier to get to when you start cutting. What you want to do though, before you start cutting out all the parts, is you might want to do a rough cut and cut out all these pieces, so they're in individual pieces of foam board. And then you may need to add a little bit of tape around the edges after you cut it, just to hold it secure so it's nice and in place when you start cutting. Okay guys, I now have all the parts cut down into more manageable sizes, and I went around the edges, added tape so they're not all floppy and falling off, and they'll stay secure when you start cutting out the parts. Okay guys, now we're going to get started on cutting out the parts. I'm going to start with the main wing portion. I'm going to cut along all the edges and then cut out the elevon slots with the double 45-degree cuts and the vertical stabilizer slot and stuff like that. One note, okay, if you guys are going to use differential thrust, I have it noted on here that these motor mount angles here are at 3 degrees at an inward angle if you're going to use differential thrust. If you're not planning on using differential thrust to get more efficiency, there's a dash line to just cut it at a straight 90-degree angle, so it'll be nice and straight, and you should have more efficiency and more straightforward thrust. I'm hoping the angle for the differential thrust will help kind of pull the plane in the yaw direction of each of the motors. So that I still have to test out when we put this plane together and fly it. But anyway, like I said, it's noted on here on the plans. There's a dash line for the 90, or the dark line is at the 3-degree angle. Okay guys, I have the main wing all pretty much cut. I put the double 45-degree bevel cuts for the elevons, so we got a hinge point there. And I used the 45-degree bevel cutter to first put a rough cut along the bottom side leading edge of the main wing. And then sometimes, your hand cutting might not be totally perfectly even, so what I usually do is I'll take a sanding block and then I'll sand it down to get it as even as possible all the way along the main wing leading edge on both sides. Okay, and to complete the elevons, usually I'll take the hot glue gun and I'll put a little bit of hot glue down inside this hinge, and then we'll wipe it with a spare piece of foam board to make a nice thin layer of hot glue over this area. So this will help create like a hot glue hinge, and also will help, you know, keep the foam board paper from separating apart while the hinge is in use. So it makes it a little bit stronger. It's just something I kind of recently started doing. Usually I used to use tape, but this is kind of quick and easy. So you just put a real thin layer of hot glue, let it dry kind of in the open position like that. Then after it's dry, then you can start folding it and flexing it, and it'll have a little bit more give and ease of motion. Okay guys, next piece, here's the KFM2 airfoil top piece. Basically this is super simple. It's just, you know, all straight cuts pretty much all the way around. And then after you get it cut out, you're going to do the same single 45-degree bevel cut along the front leading edge with the 45-degree bevel cutter. Then after that, you know, you just sand it down like we did on the other piece to get a nice smooth even bevel cut along the leading edge. Okay guys, I got the KFM2 airfoil piece all cut out. I used the 45-degree bevel cutter to put an initial 45-degree bevel cut all the way along the leading edge. And again, I used a sanding block to smooth it all out all the way around. So I now have the KFM2 airfoil piece ready to epoxy onto the top of the main wing. Basically it's just going to fit on here like this. I'm going to use some 5-minute epoxy to glue it down. I usually like to use that instead of hot glue because I can spread it out nice and even all out, and it gives me about 5 minutes to work with it before I can press it down and glue it together. And usually after you put the glue in, you'll put some weights on top of this to make sure it's pressed on nice and secure, and hopefully it'll keep all the air bubbles out and make this leading edge nice and secure together with no gaps, so when you're flying, no air will get in between the two pieces of the wing. So let me epoxy it down, and then we'll continue on with the build after that. KF airfoil piece is glued or epoxied on top, so that's ready to go. We're just going to set it to the side for now, and we'll start working on the next couple pieces. This is the upper and lower fuselage. They're pretty much identical pieces. It's pretty straightforward to cut it out. It's all kind of straight cuts to cut it all out. But then after you get it cut out, that's when it gets a little more harder. You got to start using the 45-degree bevel cutter and cut out, you know, double 45-degree bevel cuts kind of through the middle sections. And on the edge, there's a single 45-degree bevel cut that pretty much goes on the areas that'll, you know, kind of fold down at an angle. This back area, you don't need to do a 45-degree angle bevel cut because that'll be basically straight up and down. It'll be perpendicular to the fuselage, so that'll be nice and flush. And then you've got a couple slots and all this stuff you got to cut out, and basically kind of folds together like origami. These two parts, like I said, are pretty much identical. The only difference is going to be later on we're going to cut out the battery hatch, you know, after it's all kind of formed and glued onto the plane, and that's on the top piece. So let me get these cut out with all the bevel cuts and everything, and then I'll show you what it looks like. Okay guys, I got the top and bottom parts of the fuselage all cut out. This is what it looks like when you have all the bevel cuts on the flat piece. After you get all the bevel cuts done, basically you'll just hot glue it in shape like this piece here. The top and bottom fuselage are basically identical, other than you'll cut a hatch in later for the battery hatch on the top of the fuselage. Okay guys, next up we got the four motor mount cover pieces to cut out. They're pretty much very similar. The top ones are a little bit different as they got a little bit of a notch on this sloped end here, so it'll line up better with the KF airfoil. The bottom side, it just goes all the way down to meet up with the main wing. So these are basically straightforward. You know, you just have straight cuts all the way around, and then you'll have some double 45-degree bevel cuts throughout the middle. And then on these edges here where this folds up, you'll have a single 45-degree bevel cut there. So let me cut these out and then I'll show you what they look like. Okay guys, I got the 4 motor mount cover pieces all cut out. And when you initially cut it out, it's going to basically look like this, where you have the center lines of the double 45-degree bevel cuts coming down the middle. And you got a mark for the single 45-degree bevel cut over here by the triangulated pieces where it's going to fold. So after you get all the bevel cuts, it's basically going to look like this. It'll fold up nicely and take form, kind of like that. And then you just basically hot glue it so it looks like that. So you'll have 4 motor mount pieces that pretty much kind of look like this once you have them all done. Okay guys, the 4 motor mount cover pieces are all pretty much finished. I got them all hot glued into shape and they're ready to be mounted on the plane. We will be mounting them later once we get the motor mounts attached to the main wing and some of the electronics. So let's put those to the side for right now. And the very last piece you have to cut out is the vertical stabilizer piece. I do recommend cutting this out of premium foam board that's a little bit stronger and more rigid than the regular Dollar Tree foam board. If you don't have premium foam board, you can use the regular foam board. It just won't be as durable. This piece does have the optional rudder, so if you guys plan on putting a rudder on the plane, go ahead and cut that out. If not, you can just leave it, all as one just big vertical stabilizer. It will fly fine with just elevon controls without a rudder, in a basic bank and yank configuration. If you do want to add the rudder, it will add a little bit of yaw control mixed in with your ailerons. So let's cut this out. It's basically pretty much all straight cuts. And then you got a double 45-degree bevel cut if you're putting in the rudder. That's a vertical stabilizer piece is now all cut out. Like I said, it's all straight cuts all the way around and throughout the notch. You got one straight cut through here to create the rudder and a double 45-degree cut here to make the rudder hinge. Just like the elevons, I'm going to run a small bead of hot glue down here, make it a little stronger, and then I'll spread it out with the scrap piece of foam board, make it real thin, and that'll help hold it together and keep it from separating out as you work the rudder and fly it. So I'll let it dry kind of in the open position, and then after it dries, then you can flex it and get it to where it moves freely. Okay guys, I now have all the pieces cut out. I did a quick test fit to see how everything fits together. Looks like everything's fitting nice on the plane. So we're getting ready to start putting in the electronics. The fuselage pieces aren't glued on right now because we're going to put the electronics in and run the wires kind of underneath it. So we'll take it back apart now that I just got a quick test fit, and we'll start going over the electronics. Here's the electronics I'm going to put into this plane. These are basically the same electronics that I had in the previous FF-Stingray. I tore them out of that plane. I left it all connected so I don't have to refigure everything out, but let's kind of take a quick look at it. So for this build, I'll be using a 4S 1300 milliamp LiPo battery. I've got 2 T-motor F40 motors. These are drone motors, and I will be running drone props. These are 6-inch by 4.5-inch pitch. Okay, and for the ESCs, since I am only running 4S, I am just using regular ESCs. These are old Turnigy 30 amp ESCs that I had lying around. If you are buying new ESCs, I'd probably recommend getting ESCs that have the BL Heli software suite. They work a little bit better with drone type motors. If you are using ESCs that have a built-in BEC, you'll need to cut one of the power wires. So I don't know if you can see that there. So you don't want the 2 power sources to interfere with each other. So basically just cut off one of the red wires from one of the ESCs, so that cuts the 5-volt BEC power, so you don't have duplicates, so they won't be fighting each other. I will be using 2 metal gram Emax servos. These are 12-gram servos. Those are for your elevons. And then I had one extra, I think it's like a Tower Pro type ESC. It's a 12-gram Metal Gear servo, also for the rudder. And my radio, I'm using the FR Sky. I've got an 8-channel radio, so I can have my dual throttles on separate channels, so I can do differential thrust. If you only have a 6-channel radio, you probably won't be able to do differential thrust, so you'll probably just use a Y cable to go to your 2 ESCs. So that's pretty much it. Let me start getting this stuff mounted into the plane. It's fairly basic. Oh, real quick, let me see if I can find it. Where's the motor mount? Okay guys, here's the motor mounts. I'll be using 3D printed motor mounts. You can get the free file for these. I'll have it on the website. You can just download it and print as you need. If you don't have a 3D printer, you can pretty much improvise a wooden motor mount that's similar in size, and that will fit into the motor mount covers, or if needed you can modify on your own as you need to mount the motors. But anyway, these are 3D printed motor mounts. So the motors will mount to that, and then those get hot glued onto the plane, main wing. So these just slide on, basically like that. And again, for this build, I'm putting it in with the 3 degrees inward tilt, since I will be using differential thrust. If you're not using differential thrust, then you'll just want to do the full straight across 90-degree perpendicular to the wing. Okay, let's start getting this mounted, and then we'll take a look. So I now hot glued the motor mount onto the plane with the motor, and I've got the wires run towards the middle. I got the 2 ESCs. I just tacked them down with hot glue just to hold them in place on the bottom side in the center of the wing. So later on those will be covered up with the fuselage, and I'll cut some little holes here so the wires can go through a little more easily. But basically that's kind of where those are going. I cut 2 access holes, one for the main power wire to come up through to the top, and also for the ESC servo connection wires. Basically those will go through to the top side and connect to the receiver. After you get the motors mounted, then you can start adding on the motor covers. That'll help make it a lot more secure onto the plane. So basically those just go on like that, hot glue into place on the top and the bottom. That'll make it a lot more rigid. Alright, we have the 2 Elevon servos now mounted into the plane. They're basically mounted inside the KFM2 airfoil, and then just vertically mounted right straight in. The rudder servo, the optional servo, is mounted towards the back. I put it right along the side of where the fuselage will be, and then it'll later connect to the rudder. So real quick, here's the view of the bottom. So I got the 2 ESCs just tacked down with some hot glue just to hold them in place while I glue the fuselage on. Here's your 2 Elevon servos coming through the bottom with the servo cables coming to the middle, and then here's the rudder servo. So everything's kind of ready. So I'll be gluing on the bottom fuselage portion. Basically it'll go there. I'll cut some slots for the wires to pass through, and then that'll be it pretty much for the bottom. Okay guys, I've got the battery now placed inside the plane. Basically, to find the placement, I have everything set up other than the control rods, control horns, but I was balancing it on top of the main wing here with pretty much everything on there with the fuselage in place. And you want to balance it on the CG point, which is roughly right here where the motor mount and the main wing meet. So that's right there, pretty close. So it should be pretty close to the final balance once I put in the control rods and control horns. I may have to add just a tiny bit of weight, so if I do, I'll probably just put a little weight up front here, and then it should be perfectly balanced. But pretty much that's kind of the completion of the main part of the build. So you'll probably just want to put some Velcro in here to hold the battery in, and then we'll glue the top on the top of the fuselage. And also after you get it glued on, then that's when we'll cut the final hatch for accessing the battery. So let me get this glued on, and then I'll cut the hatch, and then I'll show you what it all looks like. Okay guys, the plane is pretty much finished up. I cut in the top hatch, and I just made a quick tape hinge, as you can see there. I put a magnet on the top and bottom of the opening, so it just closes and holds in place. All the control horns are now in for the elevons and the rudder. All the decals I put on as shown in the those decal pages that I had earlier. So basically just cut them out, stick them on, and it's pretty much ready to go. Last thing you need to do is double check your CG again, your center of gravity balance point. And again, it's right here on these points where the motor mount and the wing meet. So I got the battery and everything in here, it's ready to fly. So as you can see, it's balancing on that point. So that's where you want your plane to balance before you go to fly. Okay guys, that's pretty much going to finish up this build video for the FF-Stingray. I'll try and get out and fly this one and do a maiden flight on the this version of it. And this is pretty much the final version. The plans are now on the website, and they are free for anyone to download and build your own copy of the FF-Stingray. Thanks again for watching, and stay tuned for rcFoamFighters for more videos coming.